Welcome to an Uncredible show. Unreliable, unqualified, and for Pete's sake, if you're a conservative, and for Christ's sake, if you're me, go somewhere else for your news. So I tend to gravitate towards stories about the war on terror, our surveillance state, civil liberties, etc., because I think they're the most important, and they're also I guess, consequently, the most interesting. But I'm going to try and move a little bit away from that today and talk about some stories that maybe are a little bit more fun because they're about idiots. But first, I have to talk about just an update on the Bradley Manning trial. I read some stuff about it today. It's been underway for a couple days now. So an article in Salon reports the way that the prosecution and the defense, respectively, characterize Manning. And neither characterization is a surprise. The prosecution paints him, I'll start with the prosecution, as an arrogant opportunist, which, if you've listened to his pretrial testimony, is, I would say, a bit of a stretch, potentially a huge stretch. I guess it depends on, I guess, just whether you believe him or not. But I mean, you'd have to go into it making the assumption, with prejudice, to come away with the impression that he was an arrogant opportunist. Because, and you might very well, if you just heard that, there's this guy, he had a bunch of documents, he, released them to the press. And if that's all you don't know the facts, you haven't heard his testimony, I could see why you might just, if you're a cynical person, you might think, oh, well, he's obviously just an opportunist. Although, what he had to gain by that, compared to what he had to lose, I think, I guess the most you could say if you thought he was an opportunist is that he's incapable of doing a halfway decent cost-benefit analysis. I mean, unless he wanted to die, although there actually was some evidence that came out that suggested maybe he did. So I guess let's just move on. When you listen to him, he's either a master class actor, or he was a kid in the toughest situation who ran across these things the government did, these illegal things, in the line of work. He was working in intelligence, and he tried to inform the public through the mainstream media. I think the Washington Post and the New York Times, they both either ignored him or outright rejected him, and ultimately he decided to leak them to WikiLeaks. That reminds me. What else he did? I always scan the first few comments whenever I read a story online, whenever I'm researching a story to do the show. And I do that with Twitter too. Like if there's a tweet that I like, I wonder what people are saying about this. Quick read, like 2 or 3 of them. And the overwhelming majority of the comments that I read about Manning are against him, which I'm not going to say shocks me, but they're sort of half disturbing, but also half kind of funny. Here's what I mean. I'll just read one that I think is representative, although succinct, and sort of sums up the general, like almost perfectly, the sort of consensus that these online commenters seem to have. It's a guy named Da Da Da. By the way, I know it's sketchy and anecdotal to read comments if you're trying to do some sort of show that has any sort of credibility, but I can't resist. So here we go. It's an Uncredible show. It's in the title. This guy says his name is I'm a Prick. 1964. He says jail him for life. He wanted to be someone and failed. Too bad, so sad, go to jail. You work for the U.S. citizens, not for some ashhole. I think he meant asshole, maybe he meant ashhole. Not for ashhole self-interest, Bradley Manning. You think there's a crime being committed? Report it to your superiors. He says ashhole again, so I think he means... Oh, I see. He's avoiding getting censored because this particular website censors the comments for curse words. Genius. I'm a genius figuring that out so quickly. Reported to your superiors, you ashhole traitor Bradley. That is awesome. Now, if I could talk to this guy, I might try to reason with him. Obviously, he doesn't know the facts. He did support it to his superior officers, and which I covered on the show yesterday. So you should have watched my show, and you would have known. No, when he reported it to his superior officers, they said, drop it. And the way that he described it was, chilling, disturbing, other synonyms. You can, read about that story, listen to his testimony, and you'll see. But yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that you have the facts wrong, dude, who will never listen to this and will never hear what I'm saying, you seem to be implying that he's not doing his job of protecting the U.S. citizens, right? I mentioned on a different show, the definition of whistleblower, which there may be some official definition, but at least my understanding of how you get legal status as a whistleblower or some sort of legal protection as a whistleblower is if you attempt to report wrongdoing to your superiors, which Bradley Manning did, and your superiors either tell you to shut up or threaten you or fire you or in some other way cover up what you're trying to reveal. So that's exactly what Bradley Manning was trying to do. He tried to reveal illegal things that the U.S. government had done. His superiors shut him down, and that's why he is a whistleblower. Even if he did break the law, that's why he should have protection as a whistleblower. So, fuck you, dude. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. So let me move on to the way that the defense is framing Manning. They're trying to say that he was naive but well-intentioned, right? Which, neither one of these, as I said before, is surprising. Well-intentioned is about right, I think, for Bradley Manning. Although there is testimony from the guy who turned him in, named Adrian, I guess is it Lamo, that Manning was deeply troubled, just generally speaking. In fact, there's evidence that shows that. It's not just his testimony. They sent emails to each other. They chatted online. And in fact, for a period of time after Lamo told his superior officers about this, who did have a distinct interest in Manning, he actually chatted with them for a while under their supervision. And Manning said things like, "I'm weak, and I don't believe in good guys and bad guys anymore," which is a statement not likely to be well received in our country. Which I don't know if you know this, but we have trouble viewing things in a non-black and white dichotomy, right? We can thank propaganda for that. And he also said that he was afraid of people finding out he was gay, which, we ended Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but I'm going to do a story a little bit later about, military culture, and you can see why that might be a problem. So, based on those phrases and some other ones that came out in the trial, they raises questions about his mental state, right? How much of that is due to his being in a a sort of fish out of water situation that was a really tough circumstance, but it does seem like facts that may go against the defense's case, right? So he has he seems to have these mental problems, and while it may not prove that he did intentionally, he was an opportunist seeking fame, or I guess if he's a complete moron, fortune, maybe he thought he would write a book or something. Even if it doesn't prove that stuff, I think it works against the defense's case. Not because, as I said, they'll disqualify him from being well-intentioned necessarily, but it could go the other way in terms of sympathy, right? I mean, maybe the judge is a tough guy who despises weakness, right? I mean, if you've ever seen A Few Good Men, we could submit that as evidence. I'm sure the judge would love that. I know. Speculation. Who knows if the judge is a guy who despises weakness, but it could work against him, especially, and not just in the military culture either, but, in the U.S. culture. I mean, we tend to shame the victim and rather than, and not to say that, Bradley Manning is necessarily a victim. I think that's pretty clear too, at least, according to the UN, who said that his treatment was inhumane. But in the court of public opinion, I mean, clearly, if, the people who comment are any way to judge, I mean, they I don't know, maybe despise weakness is the wrong way to describe that. They despise, I don't know, any sort of suggestion that perhaps we're the good guys and they're the bad guys and Muslims are all terrorist mentality, is something that they're not, these people aren't interested in doing. One thing is clear though, and I don't think this is the point the defense is trying to make. Manning was definitely naive. Remember I said naive but well-intentioned. Well-intentioned, you could have an argument about that. Naive, if you take him, at his word that, yeah, he thought that this would make a difference, which is what he said in his testimony. Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious that that didn't happen. And if he had a couple of brain cells rubbed together, he wouldn't have thought that either. And I think that's actually one of the biggest tragedies about this, is that there had to have been a much better way to go about this. And maybe if you didn't have, sort of these seeming mental issues that he's going through, feelings of weakness, fear. And at one point he even said that he thought about committing suicide. He was afraid people finding out he was gay. Like, if he didn't have all of these things hanging over his head, and not to mention the guilt of, like, the knowledge of what the U.S. government is doing and, the moral quandary he must have been in about whether he should reveal it or not, like, that's going to affect the degree to which he can, could make good decisions. And he might have come up with a better way to, to leak the information without bringing all this down in his head. And in fact, this Adrian Lamo guy, he didn't have to reveal his identity to him. There's, I don't know the guy's name, but there's some guy who I guess made a documentary about this, and he talks about how, speculates about the reasons why Manning needlessly revealed his identity to this guy. And apparently, he said something along the lines of that he wanted people to know who he was, right? Which, I don't necessarily call that an opportunist. I mean, I think that's just a normal human emotion that any rational person would have. But, I mean, he says in his testimony that he thought releasing these documents would start a conversation about our foreign policy. Instead, this dude turned him in. He went to jail, and the band played on. As, he should have known. But he's 22. Maybe he still had, a little bit of optimism left in him. And, for all I know, maybe he still does now. But, all of that, wasn't before the mainstream press completely ignored the content of the leaks and, focused on the crime of the leak itself, which, didn't help the situation either. By the way, does that sound familiar? Who else do we know that has a record of ignoring the content of unfavorable leaks to favor prosecution and demonization of the leakers themselves? So the defense asked Lamo, or I'm going to call him Adrian from now on, at one point, if Manning ever admitted that he was being disloyal to America, right? And Lamo said, I already went to Lamo, said Adrian. He said, not in those words, no. And this is according to the Salon article. And then the defense asked him another question, which was, did he want to help the enemy by leaking the documents? And Lamo said, no, or not in those words, no. And, if you read the other stuff that Lamo said, and you combine that with the the knowledge that he's the one who turned Bradley Manning in. It's, I don't know, he just kind of seems like a dick. Not in those words, no. If it would have been strategically bad or unwise for the defense to press him on, like, oh, really? In what words did he say that he would wanted to help the enemy by leaking the documents? Right. I mean, did Bradley Manning say anything like that he wanted to help the enemy? My guess is that fuck no, he didn't say that. But Lamo says, not in those words, no. Which is implying that in some other words he did. But really what's happening in that testimony is that Lamo is saying, like, I strongly disapprove of what Bradley Manning did. So it's misleading to phrase it to imply that Bradley Manning actually did say that, just not in those particular words. So I mean, he kind of seems like a prick, but all stuff is unsurprising. It was just something that I noticed, and I'm gonna admit to a bias because I think that Bradley Manning is a hero and he should be released. So obviously I'm gonna have something against the guy who turned him in. Although, if I was trying to be fair, I might say that, this guy was probably fearful that perhaps this information would get into the enemy's hands, or at the very least that he would get caught and get in trouble with his superiors. But, I mean, that's being fair. Do I think anything like that? Well, okay, I'll put it this way. If I had to make a choice between, I could... If I could only choose, which one did the right thing, or if, like, let's say there's another hypothetical moral situation, and you have to put two guys in there, and they have to make a decision for the greater good against their own interest. Who would you rather have making that decision, Manning or this guy Lamo? Right? Okay, enough. The final. I mean, there's a whole ton of other stuff, but the last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of updating on this, on the Bradley Manning story, is there was a former sergeant who oversaw Private Manning's training unit. His name is Brian Madrid. And he talked about an incident in which Bradley Manning drew, as the article puts it, drew scrutiny for making a YouTube video describing his schedule and training. It used terms like, top secret, although it did not include any secrets. Mr. Madrid required him to make a class presentation on protecting operational information. Afterward, Private Manning said it would not happen again. A prosecutor, and then, of course, the prosecutor obviously asked Madrid the rhetorical question, did it happen again? To which Madrid replied, because you're not allowed to leave rhetorical questions where they stand without answering in a court of law. I believe so. That's why we're here. So the important thing about that is that if that's true, it would appear that Manning was into the idea that he was in a position where he had top secret information, and although he didn't reveal any information, he enjoyed being able to play that role in public, right? Which, it isn't a huge thing, just generally speaking. Like, it doesn't mean that he's in it as an opportunist. I mean, to me, it sounds more likely that it's just part of this mentality that he had about wanting to be somebody, or, not being able to fit in among his peers in the military, and trying to seek that inclusion somewhere else, and going to YouTube to try to find it, which it wouldn't be the first time that's happened. I think that's more likely the case, but it definitely works against him because he had an issue. They tried to correct it. He said he wasn't going to do it, and then he went and he did reveal classified information. So I think that's going to work against him. I hope it doesn't, but it's it's not as cut and dry as it might seem. He was a complicated character. So gonna move on to the next story, but gonna try to connect them here with a little segue. Although I already ruined it by referring to it directly. So I alluded in the last story to a sort of climate in the military that may not have been conducive to the success of someone like Bradley Manning. And if you think about it for a couple seconds, you know anything about him, you know anything about the military, you can sort of you refer to that as self-evident, perhaps. Now, I don't know whether to call this a symptom or part of the cause, but check out this story. So Saxby Chambliss, which has always sounded like I don't know, like an instrument that you can drink mead out of or something. It was in a Senate Armed Services Committee, and he said he made a comment. The young folks who are coming into each of your services. He's referring to some different officers in the military. So each of your is, you know, the judges on the panel, or not the judges. The been watching too much reality TV. The officers on the you know, in the hearing. The young folks who are coming into each of your services are anywhere from 17 to 22 or 23. Gee whiz. The hormone level created by nature sets in place the possibility for these types of things to occur. Now, what's he referring to? The culture of sexual assault in the military, which is out of control. Now, that statement is so Republican, right? These are just boys. Boys are the way they are. They, you know, they have constant hard-ons. They can't do anything about it. You know, they might sexually assault some people, but you know, that's just boys being boys. Now he says, you know, to his credit, that, you know, he's telling them they got to do a better job screening these guys, and I think there's actually a nugget of truth in there, despite, you know, the way that he frames it. Men do have raging hormones around that age. I remember all too well. We don't have to get into that. Sarah Roth, if you ever listen to this. Okay, I take that back. She doesn't go by Sarah Roth anymore anyway. She sat diagonal from me in AP History. And behind me in music. Not music appreciation, what's it called? Music humanities or something. The focus should be on the military culture, right? Not on these men who men all over the world, you know, every country, every culture have this issue of, you know, these raging hormones. And it's not a good excuse for, to use the word again, excusing them from, you know, committing these sexual assaults. And it's putting words, you know, in you know, Saxby Chambliss' mouth to say that that's what he was saying. But it's at best, I guess, reminiscent of this of the Republican culture, because they, you know, if you remember last year, you know, there was the war on women. Now, I think he goes a step toward getting it right, getting this part right. He says, but guys, we're not doing our job. You are not doing yours, and we are not doing ours with the rates we are seeing on sexual assaults. Those are strong words, aren't they? Guys, you know, we're not doing our jobs. There's these sexual assaults, and you know, we need to do a better job. Okay. Now, let me give you a sense of what you know, the kinds of assaults that we're talking about, the kinds of things where, you know, that are happening, you know, by these officers not doing their jobs. At Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, more than 30 men and women in power, which is, you know, training officers, drill sergeants, etc., were disciplined in a sexual assault scandal. So that's apparently one scandal, and 30 men and women were involved in it. Ridiculous. In another case, a 3-star Air Force general, in the same case, a 3-star Air Force general overturned the sexual assault conviction of one of his young pilots. Yes, that was a different case, not the same case. Got to read ahead. And then recently, the Army announced that a sergeant first class on the staff of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point has been accused of secretly videotaping female cadets in the shower and elsewhere. And there are actually some other stories that I don't have included in here. Now, to contrast Chambliss's incredibly weak statements on this case, to depart from my former sarcasm, let's look at Chuck Hagel's opinion. Right, Chuck Hagel's a Republican too, although on a lot of these issues, not these issues, but other issues, particularly including drones and what have you. He's actually to the left of President Obama. So, Republican, but a pretty decent guy to have in that position as Secretary of Defense. He called the sexual assaults a scourge. A scourge! A disease. And he promised to make addressing them a top priority. Oh, man. I'm doing myself in. As George R. Martin would say, words are wind. And, this next part is me talking, not him. But if you're going to have to base your opinion on words, which one of these guys has the better grasp of the severity of this issue? The guy who's essentially saying, boys have these hormones, these things happen, or the guy who calls it a scourge, and it's my top priority? Chuck Hagel, you're the man for the job. Glad you got it. I supported you. And another cool thing that Chuck Hagel did, I guess it was Congress. I forget who it was that actually instituted this new medal that for the drone pilots, and it was actually considered to be above the Purple Heart, which is the medal that you get for getting your ass shot in service. And to Chuck Hagel's credit, well, I guess against Chuck Hagel's credit, if that's a phrase that exists, he didn't completely abolish the thing. I'm not even sure if he has the power to abolish, something like that. But he did sort of rearrange the order so that now, drone pilots can still get the this particular medal of, I don't know what you call it, medal of something. But it's below the Purple Heart now. So it's at least in the correct order if it has to exist at all. Or am I wrong about that? Tell me if I'm wrong, any of you ghosts out there. When you were shot in battle, let's say that you lived, and so you wouldn't be ghosts, you'd still be alive. And you got a Purple Heart. Do you think the guy who, let's say you got hit in friendly fire by a drone. Do you think the guy who hit you with the drone deserves a medal that's higher than yours? Yeah, that's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer that. We're not in a court of law. So, Chuck Hagel hasn't bought into this, absurd mythology that men have no control and should be granted leeway on these sexual assault cases. I denounce myself for putting words in Chambliss's mouth. It's just, it's another story where you're frustrated at, this sort of regressive way that these Republicans approach these things. I mean, he could have said something a lot worse. He could have outright said, "Oh, these things happen. Maybe you guys know how it is. You see a girl there and you gotta fuck her. That's all there is to it. It wasn't that bad." And then a recent Pentagon report. And by the way, just to give you an idea, sort of a numerical picture for how bad that this culture of sexual assault in the military actually is. The Pentagon report last year estimated that as many as 26,000 service members were sexually assaulted in 2012. That's amazing. But what's more amazing is that 14,000 were men and only 12,000 were women. Yes, the military is largely populated by men. I understand that. I'm not good at math. I get that. But even so, maybe we can understand why Manning, a self-professed weakling, fearful for his revelation of his sexual identity, might not have been in the most comfortable situation. Why he might have been experiencing some stress. And then, of course, add in the stress of being deployed in Iraq in and of itself. And then on top of that, walking around with the knowledge that, of these government atrocities. Damn. Ugh. I'm so glad that I didn't have to be in that moral position that he was. I'm not sure I would have had the strength that he did. Manning, if you ever listen to this, that's strength, not weakness. Don't let any of these assholes tell you otherwise. And by these assholes, I mean apparently, 80% of the people online. Oh, God. It's not their fault. It's the propaganda. They think that the government's actually protecting us. Okay, so, that culture is seriously poisonous. I'm going to go with Defense Secretary Hagel and his characterization. It's a scourge, obviously. Good thing he's the Defense Secretary, not Chambliss. We can be thankful for that. Was Chambliss ever in the running? I don't remember that. That'd be the day where, I was going to say that a Democratic president would nominate a Republican like Saxby Chambliss. And while, he didn't nominate this guy, I mean, he did nominate a Republican. That's President Obama for you. Still a Congress that understands these things would help as well. Okay, third story. 3 stories today instead of my usual one. This is absolutely mental, as they would say in, all the British comedies that you can see on Netflix. Product placement. I wanted to try to have some kind of narrative in the show today, as well as, just doing more than one story. So, I'm trying something that, vaguely resembles design. And I feel like I should, grab another clueless Republican to round out the trio, and the trio of stories, that is, not the trio of Republicans. Obviously, the first story doesn't have Republicans in it. So, where do we go for a clueless Republican? Well, you can go all over the country, but Mississippi's a good place. So, Governor of Mississippi. Here's something that he said. I don't know where. It was in some public forum. It was quote. I'm quoting an article. Where was it from? I forgot to look. Salon. Okay, of course. Why, I should have known. In response to a question about why America has fallen behind in global education outcomes, parentheses, the United States placed 17th among a ranking of 50 countries in 2012. That's kind of shitty, but not as bad as I might have guessed. Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant, Republican, said Tuesday that the problem began with when, quote, Mom got in the workplace. Oh, man. Laugh coughing. Republicans. Awesome. Please continue. I can feel the knowledge just welling up inside me. I'm captivated by your line of reasoning, Governor Bryant. Teach me more, please. Women in the workplace. Oh, yeah. That's the source of all our problems. That's a different story for a different day. A cop once told me that I was the source of all his problems. So apparently, after he said, it was mom in the workplace that caused us to rank so low in the educational ranking, he apparently immediately started to backpedal. So at least he's got that going for him. I mean, most of these Republicans sort of stick to their story until the next day, until they get body slammed by the social media, and are forced to give an apology, a fake apology, mind you. Right? That's how it usually goes. But he had the savvy to realize the stupidity. Maybe he didn't realize the stupidity. He just realized that other people would think that it was stupid immediately started to backpedal. So that's something. He's sharp, right? So he quickly said that he meant working families in general, or something like that, not women. I wasn't talking about women. I wasn't talking about them. I was talking about the workplace. Families in the workplace. Quote, in today's society, parents are so challenged, they're working overtime. So, I thought that was hilarious because, in his haste to backpedal, he almost started sounding like he was going to, abandon his conservative principles. I mean, the next step was for him to start talking about, income equality, or how we need to get better education, a better educational system, and I don't know, perhaps even social programs or something, so that moms could go to school and he accidentally almost started talking about that stuff. It went from it's the mom's fault to in today's society, parents are so challenged they're working overtime. Now, never mind the fact that we could have a whole discussion about why it is that parents have to work overtime, and it has to do with the growing inequality, the different ways that corporations have been able to keep the growth in productivity for themselves, and not return any of the returns on that productivity to us. But that's a discussion that I don't even think he knows that that's a reality. I think he just has memorized his Republican talking points. Careful. This is Phil Bryant's internal monologue. How am I going to get out of this? I meant to say that women are inferior in the workplace, and that God made them to take care of our children, and that the Bible says that they're supposed to be submissive to us. What was this? Women in the workplace. And then, his brain explodes. That got me thinking. Perhaps it is this lack of critical thinking that has the governor of Mississippi saying such stupid things in the fucking first place. You think? But I totally forgot about a part of this story. So, the article juxtaposes the actual U.S. educational system to the Finnish educational system, right? It says, contrary to what Bryant may believe, working mothers don't seem to be a problem in Finland. Which is the top-rated country for education. So it got that list of 50. Finland's on the top. According to the 2013 data, more than 70% of mothers in Finland work, which is right on par with the numbers in the United States. So the problem may have more to do with the American education system than the women's increasing role in as breadwinners. But this Republicans don't give a fuck about facts. You could show them that list. You could show them the way they do their education system, the way we do ours, and essentially prove to them that the issue is the education system itself, and not these antiquated making women subservient values that they have. But the reality is, this has nothing. It's not that they don't care about facts. Is that, or that they don't understand facts. Is that they don't give a fuck about facts. What they want, they have their agenda. They want to take money from the poor middle class. They want to keep women subservient, and everything else be damned. And you can definitely take your science and shove it up your ass, you fucking lib. The article also talks about the ways that the different ways that we fund schools. The U.S. public schools are locally funded, usually from property taxes, and Finnish schools are nationally funded based on the number of students in the schools. Which way do you think is a better way? I mean, a better way to fund the education system, looking directly at the needs of the school, number of students, or looking at some kind of nebulous system where you don't really know how many people live in a certain place, and it's based on property taxes. I mean, give me a break. It's so obviously better, and it's not just obviously better in the sense that I have a certain ideology that teaches me that there's certain ways to do things that are better than others. It's that it's obvious in the sense that they're number 1 and we're number 17. Got it? So the last point I wanted to make about Governor Bryant was that was this sort of ironic point, right? So the Finnish schools, they also talk about, this article also talks about how the Finnish education system is more oriented around critical thinking and the teacher's performance rather than the student's performance. So instead of looking at the student's performance, and then that being an indirect evaluation of how well the teachers are doing, they have tests like for the teachers specifically. Which kind of sounds like a pain in the ass for teachers, but hey, Finland's number one, so maybe we should look at what they're doing. So there's and then there's this critical thinking aspect where like they focus on that, problem solving, project based learning, learning in groups instead of learning as individuals. So the irony, and this is the joke I started to make before I realized I had left out the part about how the Finnish schools educate, is that Bryant may have understood that the issue is the way their education system is, rather than the way that he thinks women should be if he had been in a Finnish educational system to begin with. So that, my friend, is what we call irony. Lack of critical thinking. It leads to all sorts of fucked up problems. You're gonna want to check that. On that note, I'm gonna quit thinking entirely for the night. Catch up on Game of Thrones. Peace.